You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dumler, Broncos country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Get on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I am your host, Carl Dumler, and with me, as always, I have my co-host and good friend, Mr. Nick Kendell. Nick, how are you doing, buddy?
Hey, doing well. Podcast number 2 on the day. The weather's turning around. April's here. Winter has come to HBO, and the draft's coming. So it's a good time of year. I'm getting excited.
Well, good. Well, we're also excited today to welcome back one of our favorites, Mr. Benjamin Allbright, to the show. Ben, we appreciate your time today, and we just wanted to say, hey, great job on Orange and Blue 760 a few weeks ago. Loved listening to it. And I guess what's next on the docket for you?
Well, I'm back at Orange and Blue this week and next week, and we're trying to work towards making that a long-term gig. So that's what it's going to be. It looks like for the foreseeable future.
That's great, man. I'd be listening to that every single day. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and I've done a little radio before, but it'd be nice to have something permanent like that. And I think, like I said, we're trying to work things out. We'll see where it goes.
Well, good. Well, you can make sure to find myself on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH, and you can find Nick Kendell MHH, and you can follow the podcast Twitter account at BTB Football Pod. And make sure you subscribe to our show and leave us a rating as we value your input on our show. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, and even that of YouTube. Also, make sure you head over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports and the CBS Sports Digital, to find ours and our co-writers' articles on all things pertaining to your Denver Broncos. Ben, where can our listeners find you, buddy?
They can unfollow me on Twitter at Allbright NFL. My social media is a dumpster fire. And if you're looking for more of me and you're a glutton for punishment, like I said, I'll be on Orange Blue 760 filling in for Justin Adams for the next week or two, and as we work towards something a little more permanent there.
Well, that's great. Perfect. We also want to let you know that this podcast is powered by Overtime Media. Well, Ben, today we thought we'd maybe just kind of start off here just going through the top 10 picks in the draft and just looking at maybe where these different teams are going. I know everybody's kind of getting a little bit – we're less than a month away. We're in the month of the draft and just kind of looking where teams are going to go. And obviously starting here at the top, we have the Arizona Cardinals. And I saw the other day you said to take Kyler Murray out of pencil and put him in pin at number 1. Are you still holding to that?
Yeah, I was told by some people who are pretty close to the situation that he's been kind of let know that that's the direction that's going to go. So anything can change. Anything you put out there can always change. You could have a situation like Shane Ray, a few years ago, where all of a sudden a guy gets caught with a little bit of pot before the draft or has an arrest, or I think we all remember Laramie Tunsil and that draft day deal. So there's a lot of things that can happen, and I'm not saying Kyler Murray's going to get caught with pot by any means, but I'm saying there's always a lot of things that can happen in the month before the draft. But I think that the direction that they're going to go, based on what they've kind of let his camp know, is that it's probably the direction they're going to go. I think he's going to go number 1 either way. If they choose not to take him, I believe that would be because the Raiders offered a Godfather-like deal in which they made an offer that couldn't be refused in order to get Kyler Murray, because John Gruden is very enamored with him as well. Well,
I was kind of thinking because of the Cardinals' offensive line situation, he might want to get caught with pot.
Well, it's yeah, I don't think that's it. I think Cliff Kingsbury is probably the best fit for him in terms of running an offensive style that he's going to be best suited for. I don't know. Everybody keeps talking about Kyler Murray not being suited for the NFL, and I have my own skepticism as far as that's concerned. But I think the thing that really concerns me is Cliff Kingsbury suited for the NFL? And I don't think that gets talked about enough. Is this another Chip Kelly situation? Know how a guy who couldn't win with Pat Mahomes and Baker Mayfield at the collegiate level is going to jump into the NFL and suddenly be a wonderkind. But I'm here for the ride. I'm here for the chaos. So I'm here to see it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. What are the odds you think of the Cardinals picking number 1 overall again next year?
Given the dearth of talent on that roster, I would say pretty high.
Yeah.
Your other options, Washington's not going to be very good this year. Miami's not going to be very good this year. So, you look at the rosters on paper, and I think those are probably the top contenders for the number one pick.
So let's say the Cardinals do take Murray. What do you think happens there then to Rosen?
They would deal him. There's a couple of teams that are kind of sniffing around. I think most people, know or have known for a while when, I said that the Giants and the Chargers especially and the Patriots a little bit, we're kind of looking at him. Washington kind of looking a little bit too, but I don't know that they're going to go that direction. I don't think they are. I think there's 3 or 4 teams right now that are kind of looking at that situation. I don't think that Arizona is going to get much more than a third, maybe a second round pick and some additional compensation for him. The Chargers would be willing to move, a third in Tyrod Taylor, maybe a second in Tyrod Taylor. That gives Kyler Murray a veteran backup who's short and kind of plays a similar style of football. And I think that'd be a natural fit. If you're the Cardinals, you have to kind of look at that. But, it's only $6 million dead cap total for the Chargers to move on from Tyrod. So, people talking about his contract and everything, I think they don't really know what they're talking about. It's like I said, it's only $6 million dead cap. They can move out from under him pretty easily.
Are there any other teams that potentially might be looking at Rosen as well?
Never say never on Miami, although I don't think that's the direction they're going. I really think that, I don't want to say the Chargers are the leaders in the clubhouse, but I think for all parties involved, that's the direction they want it to go. It kind of puts Josh back in Los Angeles where, he's pretty much a better fit there, personality-wise, than maybe a lot of other places. So I think that, the league is such a relationship and a fit league, and, fans kind of lose track of that a lot of the time because, we get so used to playing Madden or doing these digital, things like spreadsheets and stuff like that. We lose the humanity of the league. And I think that, people don't realize that, again, it's a situation in a fit league and people are trying to find the best for each. And I think for Josh, that's probably the best way to go. New York might be a fit, although, that New York media can be kind of vicious. And I don't know that that's a direction Josh would want to go. I also don't think that's the direction the Giants really want to go, but we'll see. Dave Gettleman's kind of a different duck. So,
yeah, you never know what that guy's going to do. Well, moving on here then to pick number 2 with the San Francisco 49ers. Is it kind of written in pen for Nick Bosa to be going to them, or are they maybe looking to trade out of the spot? What are they thinking there?
I think they're really hoping Nick Bosa falls in their lap. They've looked a little bit at Quinn Williams as well, but I think it's really down to, Nick. They're really hoping it's Nick Bosa. They're not opposed to Josh Allen, but I think that they're really hoping that the Cardinals, and I think that's part of the reason that the Cardinals are doing due diligence on Nick Bosa at this point is, can they John Lynch? Can they get John Lynch to move up one spot for a guy they weren't going to take anyway? So I think that they're kind of looking at that and saying, okay, well, they don't need a quarterback. We can drop one spot, get Kyler, get cheaper, maybe pick up a draft pick, and turn around and give, and get Nick Bosa to the Niners who want to maybe if we try to trick them. And I don't think that's going to work, but everybody's got to try something. Everybody tries everything in the draft.
The Jets, I guess they're kind of in that prime position. Because I know Raiders have talked a little bit about quarterback. You're looking at that number 2 pass rusher. You're looking at some different options there, Quinn Williams and things like that. Are they getting a lot of phone calls in for a trade down?
The Jets have had some people call and see what the price would be. I imagine that's probably trying to gauge what it would take to get up there and get either an elite pass rusher or a quarterback. I think that they're probably going to be picking at 3. I don't think that they're going to be one of the ones that's trading. I think the Jets are a lot closer to being competitive than people think. I think they're going to be a competitive football team this year, probably the second best team in the AFC East. So. I think that they're kind of keyed in on Josh Allen. I think that gives them a piece that they really need. And I think they're building a brilliant young defense there. And I think that's going to be good for them. So I don't think they're going to move out of 3. You never know. They get the right offer. Anybody can move anywhere, but there's definitely, I think there's definitely a reticence if they've got an elite player lined up and they feel like they can be competitive in year 1 to kind of go that route.
I guess I'm kind of thinking a little bit of just past drafts and guys that kind of remind me a little bit of Josh Allen and Hassan Reddick. He was a guy that was really sought after, kind of that edge player, but also could drop back in coverage. Is there any kind of leeriness about that of a guy that's kind of good at two positions, but yet you kind of wonder what's their fit?
Well, I don't think so. I think with Greg Williams there as the defensive coordinator, I think that they've got a pretty everybody knows what Greg's going to do on defense. It's just going to bring the house. He's going to put guys out on an island and have an angel safety over the top. And, I think they want guys that can do that. Occasionally they'll drop a linebacker back into zone or that kind of thing, try to trick people. I think they want somebody who can get after the passer as a primary, but has some ability to get back into coverage as well when they try to, show an exotic look or do something a little different. So, I don't think there's a hesitance with Allen. I think Allen's probably an elite player. I think that really it comes down to what can we get for this pick? Is it worth trading back? And if so, then do we do it? If not, is it worth more to have Josh Allen or whomever we would take there? And Josh, I suspect is the top guy on their they feel is going to be available for him there.
Well, that brings us then to, I would say, maybe the biggest wild card team here in the top 5 picks, the Oakland Raiders. And it just seems like you're hearing about every single player possible going to them. And you're hearing quarterback, you're hearing trade up to number 1 to get Kyler Murray. Like you said, that they love him. If they stay there at number 4, who do you think that they're going to be targeting pretty hard there?
I think it's I think they're looking at the quarterbacks, and I think they would be interested if one of their 2 guys was there. Not necessarily to point to pull the trigger, but enough to have conversation. I think ultimately they'll land on Quinnen Williams, but I think the quarterbacks will get due consideration. But I think in the end, when you look at what's available, you look at what's there, you kind of have to say, okay, what are we not going to be able to do next year? And is there an elite player, an elite talent that will allow us to do that? Right now, what the Raiders can't do is rush the quarterback or cover anybody. So you got to say, okay, is there a corner worth picking here? No. So are there pass rushers worth picking here? Yeah, there are. Quinnen Williams, maybe Ed Oliver if you really like him. Some teams do really like him. Some teams really don't. I think that's kind of the direction that they're going to go is, get that guy, finish shoring up the interior of that line. They like Arden Key on the edge. They just re-signed Jonathan Hankins, zero tech nose tackle. So if they can get like an under tackle for that 43 front, a guy like, Quinn, and I think that's probably the direction they go.
You don't think that the defensive tackles they took early last year, second round, they took PJ Hall, I believe it was second round, and then Maurice Hurst, who many thought was a first round pick, would deter them from going with another interior player there?
I don't think so. I think they know they need a talent infusion. I think that's, they're going to look at what's the best fit. You could see an edge rusher, but I think that the D-line is going to be the pick, and, they're probably going to look best player available. Mike Mayock really is a proponent of BPA, and, having his voice in the room is, I think, going to help. For all the criticisms that John Gruden has in player evaluation and drafting, he's been fairly decent at times in the, in the earlier rounds. He was the guy who drafted Aqib Talib, for instance. Yeah. So he's got kind of an eye for some of this stuff, and I think he takes a lot more guff than probably he should. But I think that they're going to look along the defensive line. I think they got some veteran linebackers in there to kind of quarterback the defense, and they're going to make it a youth movement by drafting a defense, and then let those veteran guys kind of phase themselves out with Burfict. I'm not even sure he makes the 53, and then and Brandon Marshall as well.
So that makes sense. Hopefully Quinnen Williams doesn't go to the Raiders because I don't want to face that.
So quick question, I guess, then you talked about their love for Kyler Murray. I guess I've heard so many differing reports on this. What is the relationship between Gruden and Carr? Is that good relationship, bad relationship? Where are they at?
It's not a bad relationship. It's just I think John recognizes what Carr is and what Carr isn't, and he doesn't really fit John Gruden's scheme. Derek Carr is best suited as a guy in a power run offense that likes to throw the ball vertically. And John is not that. John's a West Coast proponent. He's a Walsh disciple. And so, he wants the guy who's hyper accurate in the short game and able to put the ball on a dime in the short game, and allow his receivers to create after the catch, which is interesting because they went out and got 2 deep ball receivers, this offseason in Tyrell Williams and Antonio Brown. So, I just don't know if the personnel are suited for what they want to do. But I guess I sort of get it in the respect that if they were able to pull off Kyler Murray, then that would be cool. I know John really wanted to. He had a plan. I really wanted to pull off a scenario in which he got Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell, and Kyler Murray. I don't think that ultimately that's that's obviously not going to happen. Now Le'Veon Bell signed with the Jets for more money, but he had a plan to try to do all that. Ultimately, it didn't come to fruition. So I don't know if they want to spend all that draft capital on Kyler. I think they really like him, and I think he's a better fit for what John wants to do on offense, a kind of Gulf Coast variant. We all saw it back when Rich Gannon was running it, how successful it was, and when Jeff Garcia was running it, how successful it was. Really, quarterbacks with mobility that can manipulate the 0 to 11 yard game is John Gruden's bread and butter. If you're hyperactive, Alex Smith is the perfect John Gruden quarterback. Guy who's not going to turn it over, hyper accurate in the short game, and that's what he needs. And Derek Carr is just not that guy. So I think they recognize that Derek's a decent quarterback. He's just not a perfect fit for what they want to do.
So Daniel Jones at 4 overall to the Raiders. Let's just mark it in. Let's just make it happen. Let's let it be a thing.
Well, I don't think that's it either. I don't think that's really. I think if you're going to look at anybody, a guy I don't really care for, but Will Grier could be kind of a fit later on for what they do.
That makes sense.
All right. Well, then that takes
Greer's
us to
kind of got a little Case Keenum.
Do what?
No, I was just saying Grier kind of has a little Case Keenum to him. He's, he's decent with the short stuff, but the last thing you want that dude doing is throwing up the seam vertically.
Yeah, those were I still have nightmares on some of those throws. But now moving on to Tampa Bay, and kind of coming out of the combine, it seemed like Devin White was that guy that everybody is kind of penciling in there. Is that still the case? Just really thinking Devin White's going to be their guy at 5, or is there some other guys that they're really looking at right now?
I think it's Devin White. I think that's the worst kept secret in the draft is that they like Devin White there. I think that shores up a need for them, kind of gives them their Patrick Willis, so to speak, long term, or at least they think that will. And I think a lot of people agree with them. They have some other issues they need to shore up. They need some corner help. But I think that getting Devin White's the worst kept secret in the draft.
What if Quinnen Williams falls to them? Potentially the number 1 player in this class. I don't think Nick Bosa will, but there's potential that Quinnen Williams could fall there, and with Gerald McCoy sounding like he might be a cap casualty. I think he's not reporting to voluntary OTAs from what I recall.
They're going to move McCoy. Vita Vea is the guy there. They're not, I don't think that Quinnen Williams really even fits what they want to do with their conversion to the 34. So, I think that they'll avoid. They like Vita Vea as the zero tech nose tackle, and I think that they'll look to that linebacking core to make sure they got guys that can cover or come downhill if they need to.
That makes sense.
Well, then we come to pick number 6 with the Giants, and for a long time everybody was penciling in quarterback here. It seems like there's been a lot of people kind of moving off of that and looking at some other positions, and then maybe thinking quarterback with that second first-round pick that they have. Are you thinking quarterback here, or where do you think they're going to go?
I think it's going to be along the defensive line. I think it's between 2 players. I think it's between Eddie Oliver, and I think it's between Montez Sweat. Gettleman loves drafting defensive linemen early, just loves it. Loves to load up on, and honestly overstock on defensive linemen. And so that's kind of the direction I think they'll go with that first pick. I suspect it's going to be Sweat, but Ed Oliver has some kind of run there. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah,
sorry, Carl.
I know, man. That's my boy. He seems to be going all over the draft. I've seen him as far as 15. I've seen him clear up here. Yeah, pick number 6. So it's kind of interesting to see where he's going to go in this draft. It seems like either love him or you just can't seem to figure out where he's going to play for you.
Yeah, people are trying to figure out because he's, in a 34. Some people say they want to make him an outside back or he'd be downhill only, but that'd be an interesting look. I think you play him kind of like Aaron Donald personally. I think the way Wade Phillips did it with running that 43 under front and then having the defensive end stand up and kind of run it that way. I think that's kind of the best fit for him. But we'll see. I think he'd be a good fit in a 43. Just any 43 system or the hybrid systems like what Wade runs.
That makes a lot of sense, and that's something I would like the Broncos to think about if he does fall to 10. But moving on now, a team that honestly I had really no clue what they're going to do. It seems like Haskins rumors have come out recently, even though they already signed Nick Foles, and that is the Jacksonville Jaguars at 7 overall. Do you have any insights on them? Are they looking to trade up? Are they looking to potentially get an edge rusher, DK Metcalf maybe, TJ Hawkinson? What about the Jags?
Yeah, I would say that, if you're looking at this team, I think that quarterback is not out of the realm of possibility. Haskins is a guy that, would seem like a natural fit. And Foles, they don't have the largest investment in Foles. Foles is kind of just a guy. He's been best suited as a spot start backup guy rather than a full-fledged starter. Now, they paid him starter money, but we've seen him start before. Nick Foles was so bad he got benched for Case Keenum when he was in with the Rams. So, I think that Foles, outside of the Doug Peterson, Eagles, Chiefs, Andy Reid, setup or scenario hasn't really been very good. It'll be interesting to see how he fits in that offense. And I think the Jags would be wise to take a quarterback as insurance there. Doesn't mean they will, but Haskins be in play. The other one you mentioned, TJ Hawkinson. They really need that tight end. That's kind of been the missing piece on their offense. Somebody today suggested Noah Fant, but they don't really need an off the line. Why? They need more of an inline, more rounded tight end, traditional mold, and I think Hawkinson's a better fit there. It would seem a little early to me to grab a tight end. I'm not drafting a tight end in the top 10 simply because the fifth-year option expense and everything else. But, if I were Jacksonville and I got a trade partner, I might try to jump back a little bit and get TJ Hawkinson in the early teens if you've got somebody that wants to get up and get a quarterback like a Miami or a Washington.
That makes sense. Yeah, I'm as a Iowa alumni, Iowa Hawkeye fan, and Broncos picking 10, it absolutely kills me that I kind of pushing back against the TJ Hawkinson love fest with that pick. If OJ Howard goes 19 overall, who I think was bigger, more explosive player than TJ Hawkinson, then I can't get behind a tight end at 10 overall. Just doesn't match positional value for me.
Yeah, the knock on Howard was obviously that lack of production. He had a couple of big games. Where was he the rest of that year? Where Hawkinson, in the Iowa tight end pedigree kind of has its own thing going for it. So,
yeah, no, absolutely. And some questions about contested catchability, but it's kind of like same argument with Josh Jacobs this year in that Alabama offense. They had so many other guys to spread the love around to, but for me, I had Howard. He tested better as well. That 4.7 for that tight end is a little bit of a concern for me. For a top 10 level tight end, that is.
Right. You don't have a Vernon Davis situation where you're running 4.3,
Yeah, they're not an absolute freak, although, probably one of the safer players in the draft. But now moving on a team that, a lot of questions about which way they'll go, maybe a team that might move around a little bit, potential team that could trade back, the Detroit Lions at 8 overall. They've added Trey Flowers this offseason, the kind of the versatile defensive lineman, edge rusher, can kick inside. But I'm curious, is this a team that's going to go defensive line, edge rusher once again?
Could be. This is kind of the biggest enigma, I think, in the top 10. There are some people that suggest that they really like Drew Lock. They'd like to get out from under Matt Stafford's deal at the end of the year. So there's another possibility there with the quarterback position. I tend to believe that they're going to go somewhere on the defensive side of the ball. Could they sneakily, snag, an inside linebacker like Bush? Could they go up there and get a corner? Could they reinvest in the offensive line? There's several different ways that they could go, and it's the biggest enigma to me. I don't know what they're doing. I don't have any inside information on what they're doing, and that's the one that's the puzzle for me to try to figure out.
Interesting. And another team linked with defensive line, Ed Oliver was a guy that seemed to be linked here a lot. Maybe even Rashawn Gary, Buffalo Bills at 9 overall. Maybe they go defense. That kind of fits the McDermott mold, but I could see them also going after offense to help out Josh Allen because, after last season, they got to get him some help.
Yeah, I think this boils down to exactly that. Are you getting a chess piece on defense and Ed Oliver, or are you going offense and taking a DK Metcalf or a weapon for Josh Allen? And that's really the question. Which direction you're going to go with that? Who's got the louder voice in the war room to be able to get their side of the ball? The attention it needs. So Buffalo's trying to build an elite defense. I think they've got a pretty good one.
Yeah.
the passing game is really the Achilles heel of this team. And so, if you can find, the problem is if you draft a wide receivers tend to take about 2.5 years to really kind of hit their stride. So by the time your wide receiver is ready to go, you think of two full seasons from now, that coaching staff may not even still be there if they haven't, turned things around. So it's tough to draft wide receivers that early, especially if you're a coach that's got a couple of years in, because you know that by the time that pick really gets to hit his stride, you may not be there and somebody else gets to clean up with your weapons. So I don't know. If I were Buffalo, I would probably take Eddie Oliver, but I think it's down to receiver or Oliver in their case.
That makes a lot of sense. So sorry, Carl, doesn't seem like Broncos, maybe they wouldn't even take Oliver if he fell to 10, but probably going top 10 after his pro day. But although you don't want to double count the positives, we already knew he was an athletic freak, but seems like that's coming more and more out that Ed Oliver going top 10. So potentially, Broncos picking after that, but who are some teams that you think could jump the Denver Broncos? We talked about the Bengals, Redskins, the Dolphins. Is there anybody else that maybe is a team that you could see shocking the NFL draft landscape and moving into the top 10 for maybe a quarterback or something like that?
The Chargers might be a stunner if they did something like that, and they are looking for a successor to Phillip Rivers. That's why we talked about Rosen earlier. I think Miami and Washington are probably your most logical candidates. It just depends on what it is that you feel is a need and if you have the tools to get up there and get it. Baltimore might be a candidate to move up for you would think for a receiver, although, given the way they've invested in tight ends, maybe they move up and grab a sixth tight end or something, I could tell you it was interesting to me. I talked to some of the guys who left the Baltimore Ravens this offseason. They were leaving and, they were hitting free agency. And one of the things that they noted in leaving was that they were looking for a team that had decent offense because they were under the impression the offense wasn't going to be very good next year. They were there were some guys that were definitely irritated that they didn't switch to Joe Flacco at halftime of that game because they felt like Joe gave them a chance to win, and that might be their only chance to win. Those guys were in the playoffs. That might be their only chance. And so there was some animosity there. And so some of those guys wanted to get out of there because they've looked at that situation and said, well, we don't want a situation like, for instance, the Denver Broncos, where after they win the Super Bowl and the quarterback goes away, then the defense is carrying the team and the offense just doesn't have the quarterback to be able to do anything. So we're mired in mediocrity. We're wasting a good defense. So just a little anecdote for Broncos fans. You're probably going to like that endorsement of Joe Flacco from guys that were kind of wanting him to be put back in that playoff matchup against the Chargers, where they had completely figured Lamar out.
And I know you were, this isn't on the outline or anything, but I know you were a pretty big proponent of Case Keenum, not panning or pilot on him, so to speak, because Musgrave ran a horrific offense for his skill set. But how do you feel? Is this a strong compliment or a strong improvement going from Keenum to Flacco?
I think that if you boil the numbers down, you arrive at the production the same, but in different ways. The best quote I got about the Flacco thing was the day it went down. I talked to a Broncos offensive coach, and they said this. They said, look, we love Case. We love Case. He's a great guy. But at the end of the day, Joe Flacco forces you to defend every blade of grass on the field, and Case Keenum just doesn't.
All right. Well, that makes a lot of sense. We've still got a bit to get to today with Ben Allbright, but first, a quick break.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, and we're back with Benjamin Allbright, who's taking the time to talk some Denver Broncos draft with us. And we talked about picks 1 through 9 and some teams that might trade up, but now we're at the Broncos at 10 overall. And for me, I have 7 blue chip players in this class, and 4 of them are edge rushers. So for me, picking at 10 overall, if you're picking in the top 10, you either need to walk away with a blue chip player or a quarterback. And for me, my blue chip non-edge players would be Quinnen Williams, Devin White, and Ed Oliver. How confident are you that none of those guys will be there at 10?
Well, Quinnen and White are not going to be there. If we're being honest, those two are not going to be there. Ed Oliver, I would say there is a slim chance he makes it to 10. I always hate, putting percentages on it just because those are arbitrary numbers. Like it either is going to happen or it isn't. So the actual percentage is 50-50, right? Yeah. But if we're putting a confidence interval on it, 15%.
Ooh, stats talk. I'm about this. All right, go ahead.
15% that he makes it there and 85% that he doesn't.
All right, and that makes a lot of sense. Do you see any of these guys? I mean, obviously Quinnen Williams and Devin White would fit the Broncos if they fell to 10. you would definitely think the Broncos would sprint to the podium. But Ed Oliver, do you have concerns about his fit with the Broncos? I mean, he's not a prototypical Fangio defensive lineman. He likes a little bit bigger boys up there, let those linebackers run free. But when you got a talent like Ed Oliver, it might make you kind of switch things up if the opportunity presents itself.
Yeah, I think you wind up moving him to outside backer at that point. I mean, the problem with that is if you do that, now you've got 3 outside backers. Who you sitting, Vaughn or Bradley Chubb? So that's the problem, because in a traditional 43 defense, it's obvious to see where he fits. But if you start looking at the 34, it's tough. Who are you sitting? And what are you using Oliver for at that point? He's really at his best as an interior gap penetrator. And are you really going to use him in kind of the Adam Gotsis role where he's tying up blockers, hoping to have Bradley Chubb come off his hip and get the sack? I mean, it seems like a waste of his talent and athleticism. They managed to make that work with Aaron Donald there with the Rams last year. So if you have a chance to get a blue chip player, I mean, you do it, you just kind of figure it out. But, it's so tough. It feels like it's in terms of his skill set, it feels like it's almost a waste of what you want to do. Kind of, making him that 5-tech, kind of shade guy. And I don't know. I like Ed Oliver. I just don't feel like he's a fit for Denver.
That's tough to hear, but no, I understand. He's kind of one of those players, like you said, he's just kind of almost a little bit of a tweener on some areas, but at the same time, he's just one of those guys. I mean, when I'm watching him take 3 offensive linemen back into the face of the quarterback, and I understand it's lower competition, but that's still moving 900 pounds of man right there.
Right. No, and the other part of that is, I had a coach tell me one time that, if there's an elite player and he doesn't fit your system is the thing that's wrong.
Yep.
But if you look at that, like, who are you sitting and who are you playing where and how are you using him? Like with the Broncos, I guess that means you're sitting Gotsis, and is Ed Oliver at his best being that guy, being basically a 5-tech.
I guess my one counter argument would be with how much sub package you play these days with, the 2 down linemen and whether it be 3 safeties or 3 cornerbacks, that getting a guy, I mean, there are going to be snaps for a 3 technique in the defense, even still, and maybe even NASCAR package with him at 1 technique that I think you could still find a usage for him on the defense. But it's not even so much the weight that is the concern for me. It's the length. I mean, he's measured in really, really, obviously the weight's a concern if he is actually play at 270, but the length also, they'd be able to play that 5 technique, 4 technique, 4-eye. I just don't know if it's there. Now, if you think you can get enough out of him, considering you're playing the sub package 60% of the time these days, I can hear that argument, but still.
But are you spending a top 10 pick on a sub package rotational player?
Yeah, that's the question.
That is the question. And that's like, he's a great talent. It's so difficult. If this were Madden, I would draft him and I would put him in. But this is the real world. And it's one of those things where, like, okay, Broncos have other needs. They need a quarterback of the future. They need an inside linebacker. Drew Lock is still out there according to what we've just laid out. Devin Bush is still out there according to what we've laid out. So it's hard to justify a sub package rotational player over potentially maybe not a blue chip, but maybe that light blue chip, quarterback of the future or inside linebacker when you need those.
That makes a lot of sense. And talking quarterback now, you mentioned Drew Lock, you mentioned Haskins. Are those guys that, obviously the visits haven't happened yet. Drew Lock's going to be in Denver. Actually, by the time the listeners are hearing this, maybe that's already happened. But are those guys you still think are very much in play for 10 overall?
I would say that Drew Lock is very much in play. I don't know that Haskins is, but you can always sell yourself in the in the interviews.
Yeah,
I think the Broncos are doing due diligence. It's not just about these particular players. It's about improving their overall quarterback evaluation, what makes guys tick, learning, who these guys are. And, these might be guys that you might be playing against, on Sundays here pretty soon. So, you kind of want to learn a little bit about them, learn what they are, what their strengths and weaknesses are. And it's not just about, acquiring information on guys we might acquire. It's about acquiring information on guys we might have to play against.
That's probably why they're bringing in Kyler Murray.
Very much so.
And you mentioned Devin Bush. Do you see much of a difference between him and Devin White and what he brings to the table, and why? Why is White this obvious top 5, top 10 talent where Bush is kind of being pushed down a little bit?
It's a size thing, and people get hung up on that. Devin White ticks all the boxes. Devin Bush ticks all the boxes except size, even though his size isn't that much different from Devin White. I don't know. I think Bush is a great player. I think he's got a little Danny Trevathan to him. Might be a little bit better. But I think he's a guy that, the inside linebacker that can go sideline to sideline, that he can drop back away from the ball, and you can have him come downhill after the quarterback, although that's really not his strength. And I think he's a guy that, if you're running, your base 34 and you're in base defense, you don't have to ever take him off the field. You put him out there next to Todd Davis or Josie Jewell, depending on what you're trying to do, and then you put one of those two off the field when you go to sub package. So, I think Todd Davis is one of the better downhill linebackers in the NFL. He stinks going sideline to sideline. He's not good going away from the ball, but going downhill, he's good at getting after the quarterback, create pressure. Josie Jewell, I'm not a big fan. He's not very athletic, but he is a run funnel guy, and he's a sure tackler. He's got great instincts. So he's a guy that, if you're a definite run situation, you put Josie on there, you funnel the run right to him, and he's going to wrap him up right there. So, I think that having a sideline to sideline guy like Bush who can go back away from the ball and come downhill, I think that's a key piece. I think it's a key piece of what the Broncos are missing right now. And, if you look at Vic Fangio's defenses, they always had that piece. That was always what it was centered around. Everybody talks about off-ball linebackers and all that, but they were centered around that, and they worked.
Yeah. Nope.
Any insight to the Broncos' thoughts on Bush?
I think they like him. I think if we're looking at the way this thing is playing out, I think there's really a kind of a 3 or 4 man scenario right now. I can tell you they haven't made a decision yet. I think they like Locke. I think they like Bush a lot. I think they like Ed Oliver. I think they like TJ Hawkinson. So I think that depending on what's there at 10, then they've got a decision to make whether or not they take that player or trade back even a few picks and then try to take their players. So, I think those are the realistic scenarios right now. I don't think some other player may be a guy that intrigues them after a meeting, but I think that's the direction it's kind of headed.
And you talked about a trade down option that. Speaking with Eric Trickle, he said that potentially, there's some teams that have reached out. Obviously, people just fill in the waters, but some names that I'd like to throw out there. Yeah, Christian Wilkins, maybe. Jerry Tillery is a guy. Dalton Risner been connected with the Broncos. Noah Fant, the needed tight end. I know that they signed a couple cornerbacks, but DeAndre Baker and Byron Murphy still make sense. And N'Keal Harry is a guy they're bringing in. John Elway was at his pro day. And Garrett Bradbury, the center. Do any of these guys stand out as ones that you think of the Broncos trade back far enough that they'd be decently high pick or high odds to be the Broncos picks?
I think that most of the names you mentioned are going to be available in round 2, early round 2. Some of them won't, but most of the names you mentioned will be. And I think if it's offensive line, that'll get addressed day 2. I really don't think John Elway, a guy who literally was quoted last year as saying it takes no balls to draft a guard at 5, referring to Quentin Nelson, who I thought was an elite Steve Hutchinson level talent. I don't think that I think Elway knows that offensive line is a need, but I don't think he's doing that first round. I think that he feels like the value on offensive line guys is in day 2. And if you look at the draft history, that's really kind of where it's been. Their first round pick of Garrett Bowles, that the whole reason to bring in Munchak was to maybe coach him up and see if they're even gonna second contract him.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. What about specifically Jerry Tillery and Christian Wilkins as guys they might target if they trade down?
That's a possibility. That's not something I've heard that's connected with what their line of thinking is, but, I wouldn't rule it out just because it hasn't been connected yet or hasn't been mentioned to me doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It just means that I haven't picked up on any hint of that.
For sure. And are there any day 2 players that you'd think would be connected to the Broncos, whether it be scheme or anything that you've heard?
Garrett Bradbury, for sure. Reisner, if he's there, for sure. Day 3 in round 3, look at a guy like Jermaine Pratt, inside linebacker at North Carolina State. He's a sideline to sideline guy with a ton of athleticism. He just needs to be coached up, a little raw. Needs a little more reps. Who else? Dalen Mack would be a day 3 guy. Zero tech, little small, little on the short end, but kind of a monster in the middle. Zero tech nose tackle out of A&M.
What about Kingsley Kiki, his partner?
I don't think that's going to be the direction they go, but
okay.
Possibility. Isaiah Oliver, the corner out of Houston. Wait, what did I say? Isaiah Oliver. I meant Isaiah Johnson. Sorry,
it's all good.
Ed Oliver in there. Yeah, it's just out of Houston. I know. It's been a long day. Isaiah Johnson, the lengthy corner. I think he would be a late day 2, early day 3 guy. If he was sitting there, they'd snag him up. I would also look at a burner type receiver. Look for one of those fast guys like Paris Campbell. If somebody happens to fall in their lap, They need a burner to stretch the field vertically, a John Brown, if you will, for Joe Flacco. And that's the one thing they don't have. They've got a contested catch guy in Cortland Sutton, back shoulder guy. They've got a slot, soft spot and zone guy in Deshaun Hamilton. We all know what Emmanuel Sanders is. And they like Tim Patrick too, as kind of a goal line, another contested catch guy you can put on the outside. So I think they've got most of the receivers covered. They just need a burner. And I know they're bringing in, Nkeel, but I don't think he's a fit here. You've already got, two of him. So, I don't know that you burn an early pick on something like that. You look for a guy with wheels that can take the top off, and I think that this offense is set. I mean, you start to look at this offense, and to be honest with you, there's a lot of young talent on this roster. Sutton, Hamilton, Patrick. Obviously Sanders is getting up there, but he's talented. You look at the running back position, you got Phil Lindsay and Royce Freeman. You look at the tight end, and Jake Butt and Jeff Hireman, when they played, weren't bad at all.
No.
So you've got a lot of talent, young talent on this offense that needs to come together. I think the only thing you're missing is a stretch the field burner.
Yeah. Maybe an interior offensive line too, but insert Munchak.
The guard, but yeah.
Have you heard anything about Emmanuel Sanders? One, just his recovery. And two, I mean, there's always been a lot of links with the Broncos trading him, trying to get younger at the position. What have you been hearing about Emmanuel Sanders?
He was a candidate for trade, but I think that they weren't getting what they thought they were going to get out of that. So I don't think he's going to end up getting moved after all. There's a possibility he could still get moved. I know the Niners were very interested. But I don't know that that's really going to happen. I think he's probably going to come back and end up playing out his last year in Denver, and they're going to hope he cashes in, does really well, and they can get a compensatory pick out of it with his final contract kind of thing.
Have you heard anything on his recovery, how he's doing? Is he ahead of schedule? Is he going to be ready week one? Or
he's ahead of schedule. He'll be ready. He's always been that guy for all the other, whatever issues you have with Emmanuel Sanders, him working to come back from injury is not one of them. So he'll be ready.
All right. Well, we have Ben Allbright on here. We still have one more section to get to, but first a quick break.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All righty, and we're back here with Ben Allbright, and we got a little bit more Broncos talk before we get him on out of here. Thanks for your time today, Ben. Always appreciate it. I know you're a busy guy, but a little bit more Bronco talk here. Some Broncos guys, maybe after the draft, that third wave of free agency, if you will. Is there any talk about bringing it back, potentially maybe a nose tackle like Domata Peko or an offensive lineman out there?
I think Peko's one they're probably going to bring back. It'll probably be a 1-year deal. I think when all's said and done, they wanted to get a stronger push up the middle, and they felt like they loved Domata and he was consistent and reliable, but maybe he wasn't the same guy he used to be with getting that huge push up the middle that he used to be. So they weren't prepared to offer him anything more than a kind of a vet minimum 1-year deal. They agreed to let him test the market. And if they didn't get, the guy that they wanted, which was Jonathan Hankins, that they would revisit that. And so I think that's one of the ones they're going to revisit and ultimately get. He's, bringing him back on a 1-year vet minimum deal. He wants to be here. I think that's the best for all involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And a good guy. So always easy to cheer for that. And
right. He's invested in the community and all that too, so.
Yeah. And top 5 hair in the Broncos team. So that's
top 5. Yes.
Any talk on the Darren Lee possibility? I know that he was somebody that's been floated out there. That kind of buzz has simmered down a bit. Is that still a possibility for the Broncos, or does it seem like the Jets are going to take him? I know the Bucs were also a team listed as a possibility.
Yeah, both those are still possibilities. I think they're going to get closer to the draft. I think it's going to be one of those things where if guys miss on the guys that they want early, then that trade gets made. I think if the Broncos miss on Bush, I think that's what happens. I think that then they go to the Jets and say, look, we didn't get one of the 2 athletic linebackers we had pegged as top 10 guys. What will it take to pry off Darren Lee? And I know that the Jets have been their asking price has been absurdly high. They want like a 3rd rounder for Lee, which is not going to happen. He's going to be the guy who fetches a 5th, maybe a 4th if somebody gets desperate. So I think that's really where it's at. I think that with Darren Lee, I think the Jets are saying, okay, well, we can just hang on to him for now, and then if somebody misses, maybe we can drive the price up. If the Bucs or the Browns or the Bengals, not the Bengals, the Broncos have wind up with a glaring hole on their roster after the draft. Then we can come in and say, okay, well, here's the price tag.
Yeah. Unfortunate. He's been a guy that's never really lived up to his hype, but definitely an athlete. So,
Well,
all right, well, go ahead.
Like Darren Lee's only 24 years old now. He's still young. The guys coming out of the draft are 24. Darren's got a full contract under his belt at this point, at 24 years old. So, and he's highly athletic. So I think part of it was just youth and immaturity. And I think if he gets the right coach, the right setup, that he could be something.
That makes a lot of sense. I wouldn't even be upset about getting him and taking a linebacker early just to add that speed. But now shifting focus now to the 2019 season for the Broncos and predictions on this upcoming year. How do you think this team ends up doing? I know Vegas just pegged them as a 7-win team, but I'm curious about your thoughts about where they're going to be. I know it'll fluctuate with how the draft goes, but your thoughts on this 2019 Bronco team, how Fangio does, how Flacco does, etc.
Well, they've got a tough schedule. On paper, they've got one of the 3 toughest schedules in the NFL coming up next year. That's going to be interesting. On paper, the team has improved. They put 7. That was also the win total last year, by the way, which they underachieved by a win. But I think it's going to be better. I think better coaching is going to help them out too. Situational football was terrible last year. Bill Musgrave, I took to Twitter way too often to cuss out Bill Musgrave, which I shouldn't be doing because he's a professional coach. But at the same time, I'm sitting there like, you've got 3rd and 1, you got Phil Lindsay in the backfield, and you're running an end around for Emmanuel Sanders. What are you doing? I talked to a defensive coordinator who played against the Broncos last year, coached against the Broncos last year, and he said that the Broncos offense was the easiest offense he'd have to scheme all year. He said, you knew what Bill Musgrave was doing on first down. It was probably going to be slant flat, maybe a fade. On second down, they're probably running outside zone. And then depending on the down and distance, all you had to do is figure out 3rd down. And so when you've got an NFL defensive coordinator like openly mocking and laughing at how easy it was to figure out the offense, that says there's something wrong. And then, compound that by the fact that they're running an offense that was the exact opposite of what the quarterback they brought in skill set was and all that kind of stuff. It was just a recipe for disaster. So I think they'll be improved. I personally have them right now as a 500 team. Wait till the draft and revisit me at that point. Maybe I'll up that prediction. But right now, I'd say they're about a 500 team. I think the Chargers are going to regress a little bit, and I think the Broncos can pick up a little ground on what they regress.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that's about where I'm at as well. Well, Ben, thank you very much for coming on today, and good luck to you with the rest of the week covering for Orange and Blue 760. And you got anything coming out here that you want to promote?
Just that. It looks like that's going to wind up being something long term, and I want to thank everybody who's been supportive of that. You guys have been great, and I really appreciate that. And everybody who listens to this, these podcasts and stuff like that, I appreciate you too, and then everybody who listens to it, man. I one of those things I think that people don't understand about me is that the kind of the Twitter persona, I guess, that I've adopted, where I come across as kind of condescending and a little bit of a jerk, is not really who I am as a person, and so it's just been difficult for me to find out how many people think it is. And so that's one of those things, I guess I'm kind of working on, struggling to relate, but I appreciate everybody who listens and supports everything that I've done. And I want to make sure that everybody hears that.
Well, Ben, we really appreciate you taking the time to come on. I know you're busy, and especially this time of year, and you're probably juggling 3 phones right now, getting home and covering the draft and all these NFL beats. So we appreciate the time, but that's going to wrap up today's episode of Building the Broncos, powered by Overtime Media. You can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH and myself on Twitter at Nick Kendell MHH. Also, make sure you follow Ben on Twitter at Allbright NFL for your share of NFL Insider information, Broncos takes, and grilling the liars and the haters, although that's more of your Twitter personality than real life. Make sure you head on over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports and CBS Sports Digital, to find more content covering the Denver Broncos. Also, make sure you head on over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and comment, as your support can help us continue to bring you our Denver Bronco deep dives. You can follow the Building the Broncos podcast and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and at BTB Football Pod. For Carl and Ben, I'm Nick, wrapping up another episode of the Building the Broncos podcast. We hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you all soon. Go Broncos.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.